I think when most people get into their 40s and 50s, they start reflecting on their life, where they want to go. So I was doing that.
If someone wants to start an automation or an RPA company or a product or services in automation space, kind of a
My dad had a philosophy. So he was an engineer. When he immigrated from India, they didn't recognize those degrees at that time. So he actually had to go back and do a master's degree from Iowa State.
Hi guys, we are up with another podcast, and today's guest is Mike. Mike is a very seasoned professional with over 20 plus of years of experience. He started from a developer and ended up as a CIO, and now he has started his own company which caters to different automation needs of the client. So I welcome Mike on this podcast, and we will have a fun discussion and very comprehensive discussion about RPA and automation space, and we'll also touch base upon AI hype around the market. So I hand it over to Mike for introducing himself. So over to you, Mike.
Thank you, Deep. So my name is Mike Gill. So like you mentioned, I have been in IT for over 20 years. I started my career as an enterprise Java developer back in the days when having an e-business site was the big deal. So just doing B2B stuff. From there, I did move on to R.R. Donnelley, which is the world's largest printer. And that's where I started getting a lot of experience with how IT also intersects with OT, so the operational technology. My team was responsible for the largest order entry portal, but then we also supported those jobs going to the manufacturing floor. So then we started getting exposure to those back-end systems and how actually things are produced. After that, I was the global chief information officer for Marion Inc. And that is a die cutting company. And we had locations in China, Singapore, Germany, and 6 across the United States. So that was a pretty big operation. A little bit about my personal side. I was born and raised in Canada. So I immigrated to the United States after I finished college. I never really used computers growing up. I know a lot of people have the background when they were growing, they tinkered with hardware. I did none of that stuff. My first degree actually was biochemistry. So I'm an honors biochemistry degree first. And my third year of the schooling, my dad said, these computers are not going anywhere. Even if you don't want to major in computers, you should take some class. So I took an introduction to computer science class and learned C programming language. And I found it very easy and very fun. And lucky for me, the rest of the class did not. So there was a failing grade and I got an A. And then that was my light bulb moment to know that I know something that other people find difficult. So then I pursued computer science after that. So I got 3 kids. We live in Indianapolis, Indiana now, and, married to my lovely wife.
Awesome for that quick introduction and sharing your personal side along with your professional journey. Yeah, it was great. So coming towards you are currently running a company named 5 River Automation. So what made you start this company? After your the entire journey, the entire professional experience, what made you start this company? And did you identify any gaps in the market, or what was your idea behind starting this?
Sure. I say what started for me was, the best I can put it is, I had a career midlife crisis. That's what my wife says. So it was probably professional and personal. I think when most people get into their 40s and 50s, they start reflecting on their life, where they want to go. So I was doing that from a career standpoint. And when I started at Marion Inc., they had most of the company run AS400s. So all the ERP systems across were individual AS400s. They had a lot of things that needed improvement. And so the challenge was there. And, when there's a challenge and you have somebody who is leading that, people stay out of your way. They trust you to get it done. They just want the results. And so during my time there, we actually moved to one global web-based ERP system. It was a Java homegrown ERP system that we made ourselves. We automated a lot of the plant floor stuff. So it was fun. It was a lot of fun. And so I look at IT, my definition with IT is like sports games. You have an offense and you have a defense. So usually in sports games, you have offense, defense. To me, in IT, playing defense is infrastructure, cybersecurity, just the types of things that, just making sure that the laptops of the workforce are working, just those network is working. But the offense to me is the fun part. I never liked playing the defense. To me, it's building the business solutions with software. That was always my passion. And so what ended up happening was that as the stability came to the company and they got where they wanted, my job as CIO became a little bit more about playing defense than playing offense. So that I read, I had a couple of professional coaches and they talked about management styles. So a lot of times you as a manager, you have a certain style. For me, it's turn around and startup. That's the mentality. I want to solve big problems. But what had happened at Marion is they got to stability. So they needed somebody who was going to be more of maintenance and just keeping things stable. And there was a mismatch in that. So ultimately I knew my time over there had come to an end. And then I just looked at the landscape of the role of CIO. And a lot of that ends up being just playing defense. So when I looked at what I wanted to do, I always had a passion for wanting to start my own company. Way back in the day when Palm Pilots were very popular. I'm not sure if your audience even remembers what those devices are. I had tried to start a business early in my career related to Palm Pilots. I can just say I was too young and I didn't have the mentors and people around me to give me the right advice. So that didn't really go anywhere. So this time around, at least I had the experience. I had a good network to support me. And I looked at wanting to get back into like building software or building business solutions. I want to be the primary focus. I looked at data analytics first, but the issue with data analytics is that the time to delivery of a valuable solution is long. You need to collect the data. That you need a lot of data collected. You need like big teams, data scientists, and so by the time you start a project, by the time you actually deliver value to a customer, it's a long period of time. And so where RPA really resonated with me was because I was an enterprise Java developer, we were always doing automated regression testing. And so when I started looking at it, when I first really started digging into the tools like Automation Anywhere, UiPath, and I looked and I saw Automation Anywhere actually started as a regression testing tool. That was its foundations was that. So I had lots of experience with Selenium, like an open source regression testing platform. And so I understood the technology very well. And then the other part that really appealed to me was the ability to go into a customer and say, hey, even within 1 month, you can have some tangible value to your company. So that kind of was the genesis and the thinking around. I wanted to have an offering for my company where I can go in, I can do. It's like I always say, crawl, walk, run. So you can start with some very easy things, you get some quick wins, and then you can really kind of build upon that and do a lot more value to the company.
Got it. And what was your idea? Like, who came up with the idea of naming this as a 5-river automation?
Yeah, sure. So there's a technical and then a personal side. So usually when I look at data through my career, I've always looked at it and split it into 5 data domains. So that was the reasoning for picking the 5 rivers. And also river is something that is naturally flowing. So when you have your data, you want it to be naturally flowing, means that it brings business value inherently. So to me, it's front end integration. So data actually has, there's a front end integration and sharing and automation. Then there's back end. Then you got acquisition. So a lot of IoT devices and everything, you have to acquire the data from a source. So that's the other thing. Then there's presentation, obviously, like, dashboards and reports and those things. And then the 5th dimension to me is the intelligence, business intelligence. So that's from a technical side. Personal side, my background, both my parents are from Punjab, India. And so Punjab translates literally to land of 5 rivers. So it just made full sense for culture and technical that 5 rivers was the right name for us.
Awesome. That's an amazing story, how you relate both professionally as well as personally. So coming to the next question, can you tell our audience what exactly CIO role is and what were the challenges that you faced while playing that role?
Sure. So CIO is Chief Information Officer. Back in, I'd say like 90s and even up into the early 2000s, most companies were adopting a C-level position for IT. Through the 80s and 90s, really most of the time IT reported to the CFO, the Chief Financial Officer. So they never really had like a boardroom presence or that kind of thing. But as technology grew, it became important to have that as part of the core leadership of a team. Mm-hmm. So Chief Information Officer started there, and it was related to everything for IT. Didn't matter what company was doing IT. And so the position has evolved. So some companies now will also have a CTO, a Chief Technology Officer. And so the distinction there is if a company is big enough to have both a CIO and CTO, the CTO focuses more on the outward customer value-adding technology, whereas the CIO focuses more on the internal operations technology. So your network being available, security, cybersecurity is a big role for the CIO. Endpoint protection, just any of those enterprise applications that enables an employee to be productive usually falls under CIO. These days, you also see now that some companies are introducing like a CDO, Chief Data Officer. So that's just another way that the CIO role used to have everything, and now it's kind of for the larger companies splitting off. So at Marion, the company wasn't super large. It was a very large company, but it wasn't. We only had CIO, so I was in charge of all those items: CDO, CTO, CIO responsibilities. The biggest challenge really comes is getting business. It's been the same challenge that has been there always, is getting the business to understand, especially at an engineering company, the way IT works versus and the needs for the support of the business. Because if you don't have the CEO and the CFO and the other leadership seeing the vision of what you can achieve, especially over the long term, a lot of times with IT, you have to advocate that if this investment is made, that can be what the result and the value to the company can be. So a lot of the job ends up being I'll say maybe political in nature too. You have to advocate for the technologies. You have to keep an eye on what is hype versus what is reality. I think you'll see that today. One of the things that a lot of CIOs I know are evaluating is generative AI.
Gen AI, yeah.
So with Gen AI, the CIO has to look at it and say, okay, what is the hype in the marketing versus what is like reality? And then you got to be able to take that to the boardroom and say, okay, this is the way that the Gen AI can help our company, and then advocate to get the funding and get the buy-in. Because ultimately, if the other executives of the company and the other business leaders of the company don't buy in, it's like even back in the day of having an ERP implementation. If you don't have a business champion that's going to be your partner, then the solution is never going to get implemented. So a lot of it is building those internal relationships and educating people, and really having a firm understanding of what the technologies are, and making an educated decision on, is it now or should we wait to implement certain things?
Okay, got it. I think that would really be helpful for someone pursuing towards that career in the audience who are listening to this. So thanks for those insights. And on a lighter note, outside of your busy schedule or like your professional life, what hobby or interest that you particularly are passionate about? Can you
Yeah.
share that?
Yeah, I will say this is going to sound a bit nerdy, but I do like coding. So that is one of my outside of work things I always keep on top of. Like my dad, my dad had a philosophy. So he was an engineer. When he immigrated from India, they didn't recognize those degrees at that time. So he actually had to go back and do a master's degree from Iowa State to be a practicing engineer here in North America. And
Mm-hmm.
so one of the things that he did as a job in the beginning was he kept his he had a taxi cab license. And so for the first few years, he drove cab and he kept that license. And my mom would always get mad at him, like, you're an engineer now. Why do you keep renewing the license? You're wasting the money. And he always said, like, tomorrow I have a tangible job. I can go, even if I lose my job, I can go drive a cab and make money for the family. So in my way, coding, like I know tomorrow, even with the CIO and, those more executive positions, I know tomorrow that if worse came to worse, I can still program Python, Java. So that's an interest. But more fun than that is even, I spend a lot of time with my kids. So I have a 9-year-old daughter, and my sons are 9 and 8 years old. Sorry, my daughter's 12, and then my boys are 9 and 8 years old. And they have their sports and they have those types of things, but I am really passionate about them, learning like the way the technologies are forming now. So I'm seeing it through their eyes, the way the schools, I'm very passionate about seeing how the schools introduce computer science curriculum into that, because I'm living it with my kids having to go through it. So I spend time with them to show them the human side of the technology. Like I'm a big believer that I think sometimes that people focus too much on the syntax and not the way of thinking. So for example, like this past weekend, I was a board member for Tech Point Foundation for Youth, which is a nonprofit here in Indiana that does robotics. So they have a big robotics championship. So they have all the they give the schools the supplies for the robotics teams. I'm involved with that. And at the end of the day, the football stadium, so the Indianapolis Colts, where they play once a year, they do the robotics championship at the football stadium. So they take all the grass off and they have all the students competing, with the robotics. So I was lucky enough to be able to take my daughter to go see that this past weekend. But just involved in a lot of those types of things, because I think it's really important that this next generation coming up is, technology is going to be in every field. Doesn't matter if it's marketing, doesn't matter. So I'm very passionate about, in my outside of work life, is to help my kids get there, but what can I do to help other kids also achieve those skills so that they can last thing is I grew up in Canada, in Toronto, so hockey is a big sport over there. So just to relax in the evenings, I'll watch my Toronto Maple Leafs play hockey. So that's another big passion of mine. Unfortunately, they have not won the championship since 1967, before I was born. So every year I pray that I get to see it, the championship happen one year.
Hopefully. And
Yes.
thanks for sharing your cause. That's very noble cause, like the thing that you work for non-profit organization and help out in whichever way it's possible. That's very, very good. Yeah, as a technology enthusiast, how do you approach to consulting on business process improvement?
I think for me, it's back to even like the mission statement of my company. Our mission statement is humanize work. And it took time to really think about what I wanted that mission to be. We had a longer statement. I kept consolidating. I came finally down to just humanize work. I bring that up because that philosophy applies for not just the solution delivery today for what we do for our customers, but just in terms of business consulting and coaching. Is you have to look at the human side. Why do we have the IT systems? Why do we have RPA? Why do we do automation? Why do we do any of these things? Ultimately, we're doing it because we have a workforce. And we have the workforce. They're the ones who are doing the work. And I think that spending the time understanding the business is the most important piece of business consulting. You said it's business consulting. They have a business problem they want to solve. And I think too quickly, most technologists, they jump to a technology right away without really learning and listening to what the problem is. So, and I see this with a lot of vendors. This is where sometimes, when I was the CIO and I'd have people come and sell to me, I'd be the buyer of these solutions. And I think that a lot of these companies will come in and they will pitch you their solution that obviously they have to, that's only within their ecosystem. Oh, it's AWS. You can do everything in AWS. So you can do whatever, or if it's automation anywhere, or if it's UiPath, they only want to keep you within their ecosystem. They don't want to think beyond their ecosystem because that's not revenue for them. So I take that hat off. Even though now I'm on the other side, I still remember my days of being the buyer. So even when we're going in to do consulting, first primary focus is to figure out what is the customer's business problem, but then also to understand what their business and technical environment is. And so, even when it comes to RPA, for example, you have to understand that, the size of the customer will dictate what kinds of licenses they even can afford to buy. And so when I actually was starting the company, the focus really was smaller companies because I was just getting started. So I thought I was going to be with SMB, small, medium-sized businesses. So the first RPA platform that we were using was actually called RoboCorp, which is a Python-based platform. And when we
that recently got acquired, I believe.
Semaphore AI, I think, is acquired.
Yeah.
It's a great platform. We still deliver solutions on it. But that is in our arsenal. But then when you move upstream to larger companies, you go to companies who are Fortune 500 companies, they have other needs and their business environment is different. So I'll give you an example is a lot of times in RPA, they talk about citizen development. Citizen development, you have to understand if the business is mature enough and big enough to support citizen development. If you have a small, medium-sized business, maybe their IT staff is only like 10 people, 5 to 10 people. Even their accounting staff is maybe small. Like typically the departments that would do good with citizen development, like, accounting, engineering, their staffs are so small that the overhead of setting up a COE and doing citizen development and putting all those things, you're not going to get a return on your investment. You go to a Fortune 500 company where they have hundreds of people in IT, hundreds of people in engineering, hundreds of people in accounting, then it makes sense. So that's what I mean is first you have to understand the business problem. Second, you have to understand their environment. And then you can start then going back to the drawing board and thinking what solution makes sense to them. And so that was where it comes into play with larger companies. A platform like Automation Anywhere, it makes sense because they have the low code capability, they have the capability of the compliance and the oversight of having a COE and doing the system development. If you have an SMB customer, they may have the exact same problem. We want to do invoice processing. Maybe that's all they want to do. Then a solution like RoboCorp is perfect. It's Python based. They want you to code it. They're never going to code it, but they still need that business outcome. But ultimately, that's all they want is they want you to handle it. So I think that's really important to see, and it extends beyond even just RPA. RPA is not the right answer for all the problems, and you will see a lot of vendors out there. They just come with the only thing in their mind is selling RPA, and sometimes what I look at is like the way I say is, a lot of people want it when they get a dinner plate. You're going to eat dinner. A lot of people want to eat, just like the meat. Okay, I just want steak. I want the hamburger. Like they only want to eat meat. But if you eat that continuously for weeks, your doctor is going to tell you that you're not in good shape. So you have a little bit of your meat, a little bit of your vegetables, a little bit of your bread and whatever. Then you have a balanced meal. And so that's the other thing is you have to look at is like when that customer comes to you, you have a responsibility to make sure that they're getting a balanced solution. They're getting a proper solution that's good for their long-term health. So that's the way I approach it. I try to educate my customer. I make sure that they understand what the pros and cons are. Sometimes some solutions are short-term and you have to be okay with telling them that. Like, listen, maybe RPA is a good 1 or 2 year solution because you don't have the bandwidth to do it with professional coders. And maybe in 2 years, you can refactor this and get rid of this bot. But you have to be honest with them and you have to assess what their current situation is and really be on their side. So hopefully that explains maybe what you were looking for. So.
Yep. Coming to the next question, you are using, like your company is majorly using in terms of RPA platform, they're using Automation Anywhere, UiPath as well, right? But majorly it's Automation Anywhere.
Correct. Our primary for our enterprise customers is Automation Anywhere, and then we are RoboCorp or Semaphore AI for our SMBs. And then adjacent technologies. I still think there's some maturing to do by a lot of these things are trying to do iPaaS, integration platform as a service. So I know that UiPath and Automation Anywhere are trying to get into that space with like API low coding, but primarily for that we do Workato. So we're a partner with Workato as well. So we work on that side with Workato.
Okay, and you brought one point, like Automation Anywhere started as a regression testing or an automation testing framework. So if I may put the question in that in this format, like for your clients, what regression testing for your RPA bots, what regression testing framework do you follow? You have any custom framework in place, or you leverage whatever the platform gives you at the moment?
Are you talking about, so like for once we deploy the bots to make sure that they're not breaking, like bot ops from that standpoint?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, no, we will use we've built, so in Automation Anywhere, they actually have a Java SDK. Most people are not aware, but there is a Java SDK. So we have built a few custom components that are proprietary for Five Rivers that allow us to capture some additional information and also support a little bit better kind of bot ops. One of the pain points of Automation Anywhere that I've been bugging them to listen is when you're doing the coding, when you do the debugging, and you have a subtask, you actually can't step into the subtask. And I think that's a major limitation of the platform right now when you go to develop. So we have built like a testing harness thing that does the setup with a custom component. So we have some JSON files that we can load, and then we can swap them out for different scenarios. And then that component will know, am I being called by another thing, or am I just unit testing this thing? So we built some of our own components that are proprietary for us to support unit testing and some additional like logging capabilities. And then on top of that, we sit with a customer and because there is overhead, but we build bots that test the bots. Only if it's a critical process, because there's overhead. You have to spend more money to build these things. So if something has a critical financial transaction or like a compliance kind of need, we will build bots that will do like so when it goes into the sandbox environment, we will have something that will execute those things and then also get all the results of that. And then it's consulting with the customer, right? So they understand that it's setting that expectation. I think people assume all of a sudden because a computer is doing the work that there should never be any mistakes, never be any errors. And so a lot of times what we'll say is just like people make mistakes and people get sick some days, or they miss work, for something. They have to have that same approach with some of these bots and these processes. Yes, there may be overall the efficiency is going to be much higher than people doing them, but there are going to be days when the bot gets sick, let's say, or you have to do some maintenance on it. So it's really it's approaching it the same way like you would with a workforce, right? Like if there's a critical process and humans are doing it, you would always have a backup. You'd always have a backup person ready and doing maybe double checking their work. So we present it the same way. If it's a critical process and you have a bot doing it, if you want to build the checking bot, then that is an additional bot you have to create. But if it's a process where it's not mission critical, and even if like by the next day you can catch up, then you don't need to spend that extra money for those types of things. So like those are part of that, back to that business consulting with the customer, is just to define how critical, what's the window that this thing has to operate? Is there recovery time? But we try to leverage for the most part what is in that framework. So if they're Automation Anywhere, we're going to do it with Automation Anywhere. Now, RoboCorp gets interesting because RoboCorp is all Python code. So, you can do a lot more kind of cool things in there. So like, there, you can even use Selenium outside to kind of kick off and look at the stuff over there. So it's a little bit more of like pro coding style. So adding some very proprietary kinds of extra logging, extra monitoring. And another thing that we do in terms of bot operations, we do introduce, some of our customers don't have much monitor. Surprisingly, some of them have stuff, but a lot of them don't in terms of monitoring their environment. So one other platform that we are partners with, but we only do this when we introduce helping people do regression testing automation. On their system. So not bot ops, but this is the actual like solution. We're a partner with Datadog. So we have built some instrumentation with Datadog so that we can in one place see the health of the overall the digital workforce. So we can see like how it helps us instrument a little bit better than what's built in natively to see like how much are you utilizing those particular bot runners, what is the load on them, because the other part of it is not just how long are they processing. You have to keep a good measure of like is the process taking longer because you've under provisioned the bot runners? So do they have enough memory allocated? Do they have enough processor allocated as the network? So we also use Datadog as our go-to for that, for instrumenting the digital workforce.
Kind of a command center for bots, is it?
Yeah. They have Automation Anywhere has a place where you can see those statistics. But
Mhm.
it's like everything else. Like, like Microsoft does pretty good at most things, but they're not the expert. And so the same thing with monitoring infrastructure. That's not what Automation Anywhere is there for. So if a customer has a basic need, Automation Anywhere's monitoring of the bots and what they're doing is sufficient. But some people, they have these tools to monitor the rest of their infrastructure. So then we'll try to leverage those things, like Dynatrace or Datadog. And then so we won't use the Automation Anywhere platform at that point. It gives you the basic statistics, but these other tools are very, very good at monitoring infrastructure. So then we will have, like you were saying, build a command center that gives you the picture of the digital workforce.
Really insightful conversation, and out of this conversation, one question came in my mind is, like, you build a custom products, like how do you deploy your bots? For example, when business approaches you follow the SDLC approach, or in an agile way you do the development, or your team does the development?
Back to your SDLC thing, it's a little bit of a hybrid, in terms of the approach. I think the upfront, because it's a little bit different. So like my days of developing custom software, you're starting with a blank slate. You have like the canvas is just blank.
Yeah.
And you're sitting there and you're saying, what do you want me to paint? And you're working on that. So the approach of like standard custom development is a little bit different than automating, because typically with the automation, you're starting with a business process that's already defined. So the starting point's a little bit different. And so that's where I think the starting point ends up being a little bit more of a traditional, like you can say, a little bit more waterfallish in terms of the steps in the beginning, because you want to spend time with the people who are performing that action and that
Yeah.
process. And you're going to shadow them, you're going to interview them, and you're going to develop the process definition document. A lot of times we ask the customer, do you have your process defined? They may have some SOPs and things like that, but even the SOPs are very high level. They don't go into the details that are needed for automating a process. So that I think is very important, is to define that in a waterfall. So we will have a sign off at that point that says business and us as your vendor, as your partner, we want to say that the starting point, we're on the same page. And that's a good process, because even I've seen with customers, the people who are doing the process versus the managers who have documented the process, you will find there's discrepancy once you bring it in front of them. The person they will say, where did you get this step? That's not in the process. And then you'll say, well, when I interviewed the person, that's what they're doing. And so it's a good exercise for them as well, because it allows them to audit their process. Are they, sometimes it's, they're like, good, I didn't know we even did that. But sometimes it brings up things where they're like, oh, we shouldn't be doing that because there's a compliance reason why we have to do this. So that's I'll say the waterfall. Then after that, it kind of gets more into those agile sprint kinds of things. Because now once we have the starting point defined, the technical design document where we break down and re-engineer the process. Because, you can imagine that a lot of times things that are easy for humans to do in terms of, I'm going to put this into Excel and then I'm going to run a pivot table because I only want to make one entry into the system. So you'll do all this complicated Excel stuff just to get one entry because you just want to do one entry. Well, with bots, as we all know, it might be better to just input the individual transactions. Don't do that extra work. So we'll do like a business re-engineering of the process. And so that's the part where you can do it more like a sprint analysis. You kind of have the overall like idea of what what the starting point and the end point are, because you've defined that in the process definition document. But now you can start redoing the re-engineering and say, okay, well, to get from this step to this part of it, you still know the endpoint. The endpoint, the results is not in question, but how you get there, how you navigate, that you can do a little bit of re-engineering. And that's where we get into kind of these sprint cycles. We'll do demos. So it's like a modified agile, but we'll spend, roughly after like 2-3 weeks, we'll do a demo with the customer so they can actually see the bot in action. And then they understand, they're like, wow. And then once they see it, they think it's magic, but I love it. The first time you show a new customer that's doing RPA, even like we're around it every day, so we are not that impressed anymore by it. But when you see their reaction, they look at it, they're like, oh my God, this is magic. Like the computer is navigating the system by itself.
Yeah.
But once they understand it, it's really cool to show them as you're going, because even their ideas, they start re-engineering themselves. They're like, oh, wait a minute. So you're telling me the bot could loop and now I can get 100 records into our system. And then they're like, we always wanted the 100 records. We wanted the granular data, but for a person to enter it was too much time. So we let them just put one entry, a summary entry. But they're like, but we actually wanted all the details. And so then that's where you have to be agile, because then they start adding to the requirements, which is great because they're getting more business value out of it too. So then we just kind of iterate through every 2-3 weeks. We say, this is what the bot is doing. And then at a certain point, you also have to, with them, define when do you stop? There's exceptions. So, there's a point at which if the bot can do 90% of the processing and 10% gets kicked off to a human, they're like, okay, they can live with it. So we don't try to set like that very rigid definition. We try to keep the customer like very open-minded. In some cases, they have they have those rigid requirements, but typically you don't need them. They'll say, let's automate as much as we can. And then we tell them, okay, when you say that's enough, then we'll just make sure the human people know that when this exception happens, here is somebody has to go do something with this. So I'll say a hybrid approach in terms of how we go about developing.
Awesome. Again, thanks for detailing the steps, how you approach and how you develop solution for your client. Moving to the next question. If someone wants to start an automation or an RPA company or a product or a services in automation space, kind of a company, what would be your roadmap or what would be your advice on this?
Yeah, I'll say I've been fortunate enough. I'd say build your relationships with people and understand the problem you're trying to solve. I've been fortunate that over my many years, you look at these people who start companies sometimes, and they're not. They get the headlines, and some people are nice people, but you come across every once in a while the people who look like they're not nice people, and you always get like a little bit upset, like, how's this guy who's just seems like very mean, and he's getting this business and whatever. You do get kind of like, you feel like, do I have to be that way, like cutthroat and mean, and that's the only way I'm going to be able to start a business? I'll say that those guys get headlines, but the majority of people who in the long term are successful, they've been good people all along. So I'll say, even if you are on your roadmap, you don't know today if you want to start a business, but you feel like down the road you want to, I'd say start building your relationships and really focus on that. So most of our customers that we currently have come through just those relationships that we've built. They're people that have heard of me through a common connection, and then people will say good things about you. So I think that's just make sure you get out there, you network, you build your relationships. Even you're going to need developers. You're going to need, like, if you work with people that you've worked with in the past, the work they do. You don't have to start from zero.
Yeah.
You know this guy can deliver. So all those things, I would say that even if you're thinking in the few years you want to start a company, start building your network of who's going to be the people you lean on to help you deliver. Also start building those relationships with people who might be your customers, or at least they might say good things about you so that you can get a customer. And then other than that is, be very practical. I think creating a business plan is really important. It will challenge you to think about the aspects of running a business that, everybody thinks about, I'm going to create this product, I'm going to make so much money and whatever. But the reality is you do need to go through the exercise of a business plan and say, like, how much are you willing to sacrifice? You have to make those decisions up front. Are you, like in my case, like we have taken no venture cap money, no loans, no whatever, but I sacrificed. I talked with my wife. We said, hey, I'm going to leave a very well-paying executive job, and now I'm not going to make any money for a while. But we prepared, like we knew we could do, and that was my plan. Other people want to get investors. Okay, so that's your plan, but it all should get laid out in the business plan, because you need to know what the costs are, and then you have to really know, when you get to a business plan, you get to the marketing section, it's understanding what problem are you solving, and really understanding the problem. You have to understand what the market size is. What is the market out there for your thing? Mm-hmm. And that's a very important part to do. I think, again, back to what we talked about earlier, a lot of technology people, that's where they fall down, because they focus too much on the technology's cool. Like even with Gen AI right now, if you want to start a Gen AI business, like maybe I'm a little bit older than you and maybe some of your audience, but I'm sure people can remember back to like the 90s, late 90s .com boom. Okay. At that time, in the beginning of the .com boom, you could make any business, your business model, all I had to do was say, put .com, make a website.
Yeah, I remember.
Cars, anything .com, and then people would give you money. In the long run, look what ended up happening. Only the people who had a solid business plan, they survived, and they became like Amazon. They became these big, only the things that had a good business model survived. All those other things went bankrupt, they're gone. And I think that's what we're seeing now even with the Gen AI stuff. And I know with RPA, the Gen AI is a big piece, because like even for just creating the bots, Gen AI can be a very transformative thing for the RPA industry. But from a customer standpoint of what you're producing with a Gen AI, if you think, oh, I'm just going to do this, I'm going to sell them Gen AI. If you don't have a business plan, your business is going to fall apart. And people might give you money right now, but you're going to be broke in a couple of years because nobody's going to buy your solution. So that's my biggest piece of advice, is you have to really think about that fundamental business plan. And if you don't have a fundamental business plan, go and spend the time to create it. Otherwise, it's not going to work.
Yeah, that's really genuine advice, and to the point and very honest advice, Mike. Thanks for that. Coming to the next question, what trends do you foresee in the future of automation, and particularly in industries like manufacturing, healthcare? Yeah. And how important do you think? There's a question which is linked to this, so I'll cover that also. So, how important do you think coding will play a major role in the future?
Yeah, I think we were just talking about, I think underlying to this question, obviously, is the Gen AI aspect with the coding and all those things. One thing I'll say is that a lot of companies, tout that they have all these capabilities already figured out. And when you get in there and you realize that even some of these large companies, they're not as far along the process in terms of automation, integration, even data analytics as you would think. There's a lot of work out there to be done. Some industries are quicker to adopt and look at new technologies just because of the nature of their, the competitive landscape and what the, the compliance and those things are. So, obviously, like, financial services, they're always usually pretty quick to try to adopt the new things because there's advantage, a tangible advantage if they can speed up things. There's financial transactions. Industries like manufacturing. So that's my background. And that's where even like most of our, we don't focus just on manufacturing companies, but like that is what our, I'll say, business expertise is in the manufacturing industry. So we have companies that are nonprofit. We are doing financial services. We have somebody in the transportation industry. So we have customers in other areas, but our core focus is manufacturing. So specifically to manufacturing, it's one of those industries that's on the lagging side. They kind of look and wait to see what everybody else is doing. They never really get swayed too much by the hype curve. They usually wait to see past that hype curve what's really going to happen. And so I think that they're a little bit like, slower moving, but there's some advantages to that. I think they're still waiting to see how the Gen AI stuff might play out. But there are a lot of opportunities there for just integration and automation technologies. It's amazing how many companies still rely on Excel and access databases. It's amazing that how many people still have core business processes in terms of forecasting, tracking quality events, and those types of things, where ultimately on the plant floor is being done in Excel. And then somebody as a batch process at the end of the day or end of the week, they're giving it to a student or somebody, hey, enter these into the system. A lot of that stuff is still happening. So I think that those industries are going to start to see these technologies like RPA and start to adopt those things slowly. I think that that's definitely coming. I think the Gen AI is still early to figure out what the killer use case is. Because I still haven't figured out what that killer use case is for Gen AI. And I think most people are still trying to figure it out. Like, yeah, I can help you write an email. It can help you, interpret, things, but we can already do sentiment analysis and all those types of things. So I think people are still trying to figure out where does Gen AI from a business standpoint come into play. Now, one of the parts where Gen AI is thriving is definitely, like you brought up, is coding. So with all these co-pilots, you go to GitHub, you go to, everybody's got some kind of like, co-pilot to help you code. I think initially there was a lot of fear, like, and I think I can't remember the guy's name, the NVIDIA CEO going around now saying, oh, you don't need coders anymore. I would love to debate that guy because he just wants to get headlines and he wants everybody to buy his chips. So he's like, great, you don't need coders. You just need to buy my chips, and Gen AI, you don't need coders. I think that Deep, you can probably attest to this. Like as you work on different development teams, what percentage of the developers are actually good at developing? It's not a high percentage. In my time, if you go on your development teams, even when I had like a team of like, 50 developers, probably out of those 50, maybe 10 were really good and really knew what they were doing.
It's 80-20 ratio everywhere.
80-20, exactly.
Yeah.
And so, if you think along that kind of ratio of 80-20, I think what you're always going to need those 20. They can say that you're not going to need developers, but when something goes wrong, you need to know the guy who can go in there and really understand what is going on. Yeah. And those people need to create those models. They need to kind of keep advancing it. And I don't think these kind of science fiction kinds of things where you'll build a model that will build the new models. And I don't think that's going to happen. I think what's going to happen is those 20%, we already don't have enough developers. Even when you add up the full 100% of developers out there, we don't have enough developers. So I think what's going to happen is those 20 developers, they're the ones who are leading the other 80% anyways, and they're getting frustrated. I'm trying to teach you how to do it. Why are you making this mistake? Now you're going to give a tool to those 20%, and you're going to make those 20% even more powerful, because now they're going to have their digital assistants. They're going to have their Gen AI kind of enabled IDEs and stuff like that. So a lot of that boilerplate code already with these IDEs, they took, I remember coding on a Linux system on Emacs and VI, and so you can think about like the jump that going from like, VI and Emacs going to like an IDE. And then even in the beginning, it was Eclipse, became a big deal when Eclipse came up. And I was like, wow, like you can click one button and it does formatting the code, and the developers are all formatting the code the same way. That was such a productivity boost. So I think that this is just the next evolution. You go to like the JetBrains has got all these cool things in it, but now the next evolution is going to be giving that 20% of the really good developers. Now they're going to even be even better. And then I think those other people, they're not out of a job. We were trying to force them to be good developers, but they probably were never going to be good developers. So, but they have a good mind, they have good logic. So now those folks can move into like more of the roles of that, where maybe a tool like Gen AI can make them more productive and things. I don't think coders are going anywhere. I think coders are going to get more efficient, and we already have a deficiency. We don't have enough coders. So I think that what's going to end up happening is these tools are going to allow people, like how many tech, like the tech debt, or tech debt is so big. like every company probably has years and years of projects that they want to get to. So maybe now we might actually start making some progress on those types of things. So I think it's back to what we were saying with a hype curve. I think right now there's a lot of people just trying to project, oh, it could do this, it could do that. I think it's going to be cool, but coders are going nowhere, especially the good ones. They're going to get even more powerful. So
Totally agree with your point. And I once you said like you started your day and you bought the point about Eclipse and the editors and all. So I remember my days when I started coding, and it was classic ASP, the Microsoft Active Server Pages technology, and we used to have notepads. We used to edit in the notepad. There was no proper code editor that during those days. So yeah, I mean, I see this Gen AI and AI enabled tools more of a productivity hack, or like giving you more boost on your productivity rather than replacing someone.
Agreed. Yep.
So as we are wrapping up, my last question to you would be, what would be the one piece of advice or mantra that you live by, and something that keeps you inspired and focused, both in your personal and professional life? Would you like to share that?
Yeah, I'll go back to my company's mission statement about humanized work, and I'll say even beyond that, humanized life. One aspect that I didn't touch on, like when I was talking about I had that career midlife, I also had a personal midlife. COVID, I think, changed a lot of people's perspective, forced everybody to kind of think about life and what's important. Everybody's running around doing all this work. If you look at working hours, have become longer and longer and longer. There are a lot of people don't spend enough time with their kids. They don't spend enough time with their families, with their friends. And I unfortunately. My father-in-law, my wife's father, passed away a few years ago, and so at that time he was 75 and I was 45 at that time. And so you do like just even that quick math in your head. You're saying, what if the question comes like, what if I only have 30 years left? And I lost a few other folks that were in my age group over the last couple of years. One person actually was one of my senior guys when I was CIO at Marion, and he got diagnosed with stage 4 cancer in February of 22, and he passed away in May. So just in a few months, he passed away. And he would say, live every day to the fullest. It's something people say all the time, they don't think. But when somebody who is going to die is telling you those things, it becomes really important. So back to like that humanized work, humanized life, I'd say is that money is not everything. I think a lot of times people start chasing money. It's important to live, whatever, but these relationships you have with people, who you work with. And I really hope that, that's why like I'm even passionate about the technologies I'm working with. You look at somebody that goes to work and they're processing invoices. That's their job. And you look at it and you say, they're feeling stressed about processing invoices. And then the company is growing. They're not hiring a second person to help them. They give them a laptop and they say, okay, well, in the evening, you can process your invoices. So now this person is working like 10 hours a day. Company is growing, making more money, but the person is not, getting the rewards of that. And so my hope is that this technology goes in and can help with that. But the other part that ultimately, as my company grows, I really want to build strong relationships with these companies I'm implementing solutions to make them think about, there's like 4-day work week is very prevalent nonprofit and movement across the world. I'm a big supporter of 4-day work week. And the same way that technological advancements in the early 1900s, people used to work 6-7 days, factory jobs. And it was Ford and a few other manufacturing companies back then that said, okay, we've made our plants more efficient with automation, more machine or plant floor automation, physical automation, that they let people work. And they said they're going to be more productive and they're going to be safer and whatever. And they did. And that's where we came up with 5 days, 40-hour work week. And I think we're at the point now with all these technologies that we're going to be implementing. My challenge and my mantra now for just even like with the companies I work with is rethink how you make your people work. If you can now free up their time, and they were already working more than 40 hours. Why don't you let them work 30 hours? And I think it'll be better for society. I think it'll be better for the companies. But that's my big thing is I think that we as technologists should be facilitating, pushing this rethinking of it's not just now you can do more work in 40 hours and more and more and more. I think that there has to be a balance. So like that's my biggest thing is humanized work, humanized life would be what I say. So I think everybody who works on automation projects, even in your small little way, bring that up. And make people on the business side, as you build that relationship with the business folks as a technologist, challenge them and ask them, okay, if I implement this automation, what are you going to make those workers do? And if their answer is, I'm just going to make them do other meaningless tasks, then what's the use? We are doing this because we keep saying it, but do we really challenge our customers to think about that? Marketing for UiPath and Automation Anywhere says that. Make a more valuable workforce. Well, it's our responsibility to make that happen. We have to push for it.
That's really cool to know your thoughts on this, and actually you're following on these thoughts. And really good conversation with you, Mike. And I would like to thank you for getting time out of your busy schedule. I think you're running a company, so it's not an easy thing, and it's hard to find time for such conversations also. But I really want to thank you again.
Oh, thank you for having me. I had a lot of fun talking with you.
Well, I'd like to know your experience about joining me in this podcast.
Yeah, so I was honored, first of all, to be invited to come onto this podcast. I came across your podcast as I was following a couple of hashtags in LinkedIn and started listening to some of your previous shows. And I just thought it was a great platform for good conversation and just reaching a lot of RPA professionals. So when we started discussing, you were very open. I appreciate like how easy it was to work with you, and you've made this a very good experience. So I think that I hope that your audience enjoys today's conversation. But thank you for doing this. I think the industry needs more people like you out there educating, advocating, and just I think you're doing a wonderful job with your show.
Thank you so much. Pleasure is all mine. And any last piece of advice you would like to give to the audience?
Yeah, I would say, like I said earlier, build relationships, keep in touch with people. The people that I am now starting this company, I have two people that I worked with from my IBM days that are both helping me right now. And so we just kept in touch. So I think I think when you're a junior developer, sometimes you get so focused on just your job, what you have to do. But those people that you're working with today, they could be the people in the future that are really going to help you out. So focus on those relationships. Don't just look at your manager, trying to impress your manager. I think a lot of people look at the manager and say, oh, I need to be good in his eyes. Be good in the eyes of your coworkers, because they're going to be the ones that are going to help you in the long run.
Golden piece of advice. Thanks a lot for sharing all this. And once again, thank you for joining me in this podcast. Have a good day.